The air in the velvet room was thick, not with the usual scent of perfume and expensive gin, but with the metallic tang of fear. Chloe gripped the edge of the bar until her knuckles turned white, her eyes glued to the news ticker. Beside her, Millie watched the screens in silence, the usual sparkle in her eyes replaced by a hollow stare as the headlines announced the total suspension of the border treaty. Outside, the Detroit River had never looked so wide. Zoya stood at the window, watching the Ambassador Bridge. Usually a necklace of lights, it was now a dark rib of steel choked with heavy trucks and armored cars. The city she called home felt like it was shrinking, the horizon closing in like a tightening noose. She didn't put on her heels tonight. She laced up her combat boots. "It's happening," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the cooling vents. She met Zoya's gaze in the mirror of the dressing room. The glamour of the club was a mask they could no longer afford to wear. Zoya nodded, her face a mask of cold resolve. They began to clear the lockers, replacing glitter and silk with anything that could be used as a weapon or a tool. The first explosion didn't sound like a bomb. It sounded like the world snapping in half. The floor of the club buckled, sending glass shattering across the stage. Chloe grabbed Millie's arm, hauling her beneath the heavy oak table in the VIP lounge. They huddled there, two women caught in the gears of a war they hadn't asked for, as the sky over Windsor turned a bruised, angry purple. They moved through the back alleys like ghosts. Zoya led the way, her movements sharp and predatory, while Millie followed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Every shadow held a threat. Every distant shout sounded like an execution. The streets were no longer theirs. They belonged to the boots and the steel of the invaders. Back within the reinforced walls of the club's basement, the transformation was complete. Chloe laid out the map, the lines of their city now a grid for survival. "They think we're just girls on a stage," Chloe said, her voice hardening. Zoya traced the route to the riverfront, her eyes calculating. They weren't just dancers anymore. They were the only ones left who knew the city's secrets. Millie arrived last, breathless and carrying a weight far heavier than her small frame suggested. She dropped a stolen military pack onto the table, spilling out radios and ration bars. "The soldiers are distracted," she told Chloe, a flicker of the old fire returning to her eyes. "They don't look at us, they look through us. That's our edge." They needed a sign, something to tell the city that Windsor hadn't fallen yet. Chloe gripped the spray can, the hiss of the paint echoing in the quiet room. She painted the North Star, a beacon for those lost in the dark. Millie watched, the weight of the metal flashlight in her hand a comforting reminder that they were no longer helpless. The first strike was small, but it felt like a revolution. Under the cover of a moonless night, Zoya and Millie crept into the depot where the invaders kept their fuel. With the precision of a choreographed routine, they moved in unison. Zoya cut the lines while Millie kept watch, their shadows dancing against the cold concrete. As dawn broke over the occupied streets, Chloe and Zoya stood on the rooftop, the wind chilling the sweat on their brows. The city was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath. They looked out over the skyline, no longer afraid. The 51st State was a name the invaders wanted to impose, but Chloe, Zoya, and Millie had a different name for their home, a battlefield.